They say every neighborhood has that one person who takes the HOA too seriously. Usually it's harmless, passive-aggressive notes, complaints about lawn height, or a stern look if your trash bins are late. But in our neighborhood, that person had a name, Doyle Mason. Doyle wasn't elected, wasn't appointed, and had no official position on the HOA board. Yet he carried himself like the sheriff of Maple Court, strutting around with a clipboard tucked under one arm and his phone in the other, always ready to snap photos. In his mind, he was the law, and everyone else was a potential violator. Last week, Doyle pushed things too far, and that's when Grandpa finally decided enough was enough. It all started at 5:30 in the morning. I was half awake, pouring cereal, when I heard the creak of our backyard fence. Grandpa, sitting in his porch rocker, muttered without even looking up, "There he goes again." Sure enough, Doyle was scaling the fence like a prowler, muttering to himself while snapping photos of Grandpa's tomato plants. Apparently, the old man's vegetable garden was now a crime against the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. I felt rage rising and wanted to run outside, but Grandpa lifted a steady hand. "Patience," he said quietly. "Let a fool keep at it long enough, and he'll write his own ending." This wasn't Doyle's first time trespassing. Twice before, we caught him near our shed, poking around like he expected to find hidden contraband. Once I even saw him testing the lock on the shed door. I reported him to the HOA, but President Linda Clay always brushed it off with her syrupy smile. "Oh, Doyle's just enthusiastic. He cares about the neighborhood." Enthusiastic? No. Planting flowers or organizing a block party is enthusiasm. Trespassing, photographing bikes, and measuring lawns with a ruler was obsession. But with the HOA protecting him and the sheriff's office tied up by legal technicalities, Doyle kept pushing boundaries. Grandpa wasn't the type to sit back and let injustice slide. He was a 75-year-old Korean War veteran, calm but iron-willed. When the system wouldn't protect him, he took matters into his own hands. For 3 straight days, he worked in the garage, humming old country tunes while tinkering with tools, wires, and clamps. I helped fetch what he needed, though he never explained the whole plan. By the 4th day, our wrought iron driveway gate had a new feature, a low-voltage electrical wiring system. It wasn't dangerous, just enough to deliver a sharp jolt, but it was perfectly legal under North Carolina code, provided it was clearly marked. And Grandpa was nothing if not meticulous. He bolted a bright yellow warning sign to the gate. "Warning, electrified gate. Trespassers will be shocked." The next morning, right on schedule, Doyle showed up before dawn. Grandpa sipped coffee on the porch while I crouched behind the window. Doyle climbed the fence, muttering about violations, and grabbed the gate with his gloved hand. Snap! The jolt hit him instantly. He yelped like a startled dog, stumbled back, and landed in the dirt before limping away in shock. Grandpa didn't move a muscle. He simply leaned back in his chair and murmured, "That was the sound of justice." By midday, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. Maple Court residents whispered and laughed behind cupped hands. For years, they had watched Doyle snoop into yards, peek through curtains, and act like a one-man code enforcer. But now, they finally saw him humiliated. Some neighbors even claimed they saw him limping dramatically down the street. Doyle, of course, tried to spin the story, telling anyone who would listen that Grandpa had installed illegal death traps. But most people weren't buying it. They'd seen Doyle's antics too many times. Still, Doyle wasn't the kind of man to take humiliation lying down. By noon, he had forced the HOA to call an emergency meeting. Grandpa and I went, fully expecting a circus. At the head of the long table sat Linda Clay with her string of pearls and fake smile. Doyle sat beside her, arm now in a sling for added effect. He pointed dramatically at Grandpa and declared, "This man is endangering the neighborhood. He's rigged his gate into a weapon that nearly killed me." Gasps went around the room. But Grandpa remained calm. He placed a folded permit on the table. "That," he said firmly, "is a state-issued electrical permit, signed, stamped, and fully legal." I also posted the required warnings. Linda tried to counter, insisting, "Legal or not, it goes against the spirit of community living. The HOA has the right to regulate." Grandpa's eyes narrowed, his gravelly voice cutting through her words. "Regulate? Sure. Trespassing? No."
North Carolina law makes it a crime to enter private property without consent. Doyle has done it 3 times already. Next time, I'll press charges and let a judge settle it. The atmosphere in the room shifted. For the first time, neighbors who had kept quiet began to speak. One woman admitted Doyle had entered her backyard to measure her shrubs. Another said he photographed her children's bikes and called them an eyesore. Murmurs of agreement spread around the room. Doyle's face turned red as the tide turned against him. Linda pounded her gavel, trying to silence the growing dissent, but Grandpa cut her off. "No, ma'am, this is the place. You've let him run around unchecked, and now he's finally learning what happens when you trespass on the wrong porch." Humiliated, Doyle only grew more dangerous. For the next 2 days, he circled our block in his dented pickup, slowing in front of our driveway like a vulture. Grandpa never flinched. He sat in his rocking chair, sipping from his old thermos, eyes steady as a hawk. But on the third night, Doyle made his boldest move. Just past midnight, I woke to rustling outside. From my window, I saw him crouched by the gate, flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in the other. He was mumbling curses, clearly intending to break through. Grandpa was already waiting. He pulled a small remote from his pocket and whispered to me, "Watch this." The second Doyle clamped the cutters onto the steel, Grandpa pressed the button. Zap! Doyle's whole body jolted, and he dropped the cutters as if they'd burst into flames. He stumbled backward, slipped into the mud, and cursed loudly. Grandpa calmly lifted his phone, filming every second. The curses, the falls, the flailing arms, all in sharp HD. But Doyle wasn't finished. Fueled by rage and humiliation, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Attempted murder. This lunatic tried to kill me with an illegal fence." Within minutes, red and blue lights painted the yard. Officers arrived, hands on their holsters, eyes darting between Doyle, muddy, trembling, clutching his arm, and Grandpa, who sat calmly on the porch, coffee steaming in one hand, phone in the other. "Sir," one officer asked Grandpa, "is there an active electrical device on this gate?" "Yes," Grandpa answered evenly. "Registered, permitted, posted with warnings, and documented. Here's the paperwork." Without standing up, he slid the laminated permit across the table and handed over his phone, still playing the video. The officers watched Doyle on screen, cutting, climbing, and shocking himself. One officer raised his brow and looked directly at Doyle. "So you trespassed?" "No," Doyle sputtered. "I was conducting an inspection for the HOA." "Inspection?" the other officer repeated flatly. "At midnight? With bolt cutters?" That was the end of it. Doyle was arrested on the spot for trespassing, vandalism, attempted theft, and filing a false police report. His wrists were cuffed in front of the glowing gate as neighbors, awakened by the sirens, gathered to watch. For once, they weren't whispering behind closed doors. They were clapping openly. Some even cheered. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, sipping coffee with the same steady calm he'd shown all along. He glanced at me and said, "Sometimes, son, justice just needs a little electricity." And that's exactly what it was, justice. Doyle Mason left Maple Court that night in the back of a cruiser, his self-made HOA badge confiscated, his reputation in ruins. By morning, word had spread like wildfire. Children mocked him, neighbors laughed, and the man who once terrified the block had become its punchline. Grandpa, meanwhile, never bragged or gloated. He just sat on his porch as always, sipping black coffee and watching the street. Because when you mess with a man like Grandpa, you don't just lose a fight. You set in motion the downfall of everything you thought you controlled. Doyle Mason had learned that the hard way.